America. The land of dreams, skyscrapers, and endless highways. It's a country that sells itself as the global symbol of freedom and prosperity. But here's the thing, every bright light casts a shadow. Behind the Hollywood smiles and the fast food franchises, there are some darker truths most tourists don't see. So today, we're counting down the top 5 dark sides of America. And no, I'm not talking about pineapple on pizza, though that's a debate in itself. I mean the systemic issues that reveal a very different side of the United States. Number 5. Mass incarceration, the prison nation. America is often called the land of the free, but statistically it's also the land of the locked up. With just 4% of the world's population, the US somehow accounts for nearly 20% of the world's prisoners. Right now, more than 2 million people live behind bars in America. To put that in perspective, that's more than the populations of entire countries like Slovenia or Qatar. Imagine jailing a whole nation. That's the scale we're talking about. So how did it get this bad? A lot of it traces back to the so-called war on drugs in the 1980s and 1990s. Politicians promised to clean up America's streets, but instead, they passed harsh sentencing laws and mandatory minimums that meant even non-violent offenses, like being caught with a small amount of marijuana, could land someone in prison for years. By the 2000s, the prison population had exploded, not just from violent crime, but from thousands of low-level cases piling up in the system. And here's where it gets even darker. Incarceration isn't just about crime, it's also about business. The private prison industry is worth billions, and its business model is brutally simple. The more inmates, the more profit. Some companies have even lobbied for tougher sentencing laws to keep prison beds full. Critics argue this has turned incarceration into an industry that thrives on human lives. Freedom might be priceless, but prison, apparently, has a very good market value. But the story doesn't end once the cell door opens. Former inmates often face lifelong consequences: difficulty finding jobs, barriers to housing, restrictions on voting in some states, and the stigma of having a criminal record that follows them everywhere. In many cases, it's less of a second chance and more of a permanent scarlet letter. And let's not forget the cost to taxpayers. Running the prison system drains tens of billions of dollars every year. Money that could be going to education, healthcare, or infrastructure. Instead, it fuels a cycle that's notoriously hard to break. Arrest, imprisonment, release, and rearrest. The irony is hard to ignore. While Lady Liberty stands tall in New York Harbor, holding her torch high for freedom, the reality behind the prison gates tells a very different story. Land of the free? Not if you're one of the millions trapped inside a system that seems better at building prisons than solving the problems that fill them. Number 4. The healthcare cost trap. Now, let's talk about something that every person will face at some point: getting sick. And in America, that can be scarier than the illness itself. Unlike most developed nations, the United States does not provide universal healthcare. Instead, it relies on a patchwork of private insurance, employer-based coverage, and government programs like Medicare and Medicaid. Sounds manageable, right? Except it leaves millions of people uninsured or underinsured. The consequences are brutal. A broken leg can cost you $7,500. A hospital stay averages around $11,000. And if you're unlucky enough to need surgery or long-term treatment, those bills can easily climb into the hundreds of thousands. No wonder medical bills are the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the US. Prescription drugs are another nightmare. Americans often pay 2 to 3 times more for the same medicine than people in Canada or Europe. For example, insulin, a drug that's been around for over a century, can cost hundreds of dollars a month in the US, but just a fraction elsewhere. Some Americans literally cross the border to Canada or Mexico just to buy affordable medication. And the system doesn't just punish patients. It creates inequality. Wealthier people with good insurance have access to world-class hospitals. Poorer communities? They face underfunded clinics, longer waits, and fewer options. So in America, healthcare isn't just about healing. It's about money. And sometimes the difference between life and death isn't the quality of care. It's the size of your bank account. As one critic put it, in the US, you don't just fight your illness. You fight your bill. Number 3. Gun violence and mass shootings. America has a unique relationship with firearms. The Second Amendment guarantees the right to bear arms, and today, there are more guns than people in the United States. An estimated 393 million civilian-owned firearms compared to a population of about 330 million. That's roughly 1.2 guns per person. To To put it in perspective, Canada has about 30 million guns for 38 million people, and Japan, fewer than 1 million guns for 125 million people. But with this abundance comes a crisis: gun violence. Every year, tens of thousands of Americans die from gun-related causes, whether through homicides, suicides, or accidents. In 2022 alone, over 48,000 people lost their lives to gun violence. That's more than the number of U.S. soldiers killed in the entire Vietnam War. Except it happens inside America, every single year. And this doesn't include the tens of thousands more who are injured, traumatized, or lose loved ones due to shootings. Then there are mass shootings. Events so frequent, they've become almost a regular headline. Schools, shopping malls, movie theaters, concerts, and places of worship. No public space feels entirely safe. In 2023 alone, there were over 600 mass shootings in the U.S., according to research from the Gun Violence Archive, defined as events where 4 or more people were shot. To put that in context, countries like the UK, Japan, or Australia experienced 1 or 2 mass shootings in decades and immediately enacted sweeping reforms. In America, the debate continues endlessly, while the shootings continue just as frequently. So why is it so difficult to act? Part of it is political power. The NRA, National Rifle Association, and other lobbying groups spend millions each year influencing lawmakers to prevent tighter gun control measures. Another factor is culture. For many Americans, guns are more than tools. They are symbols of freedom, independence, and self-reliance. That makes compromise incredibly difficult. Then there's the accessibility issue. Semi-automatic rifles, high-capacity magazines, and even ghost guns, firearms assembled at home with no serial number, have become increasingly common. Combine that with gaps in background checks and enforcement inconsistencies, and it's easy to see why gun-related deaths remain persistently high. The human cost is staggering. Every mass shooting leaves behind families shattered, communities traumatized, and survivors who will carry scars for life. And everyday gun violence, whether domestic, accidental, or criminal, quietly destroys tens of thousands more lives every year. For outsiders, America's gun culture is baffling. For many Americans, it's non-negotiable. But the result is a stark reality. Sending kids to school, shopping at a mall, or even attending a concert can carry risks that are almost unimaginable in most other developed nations. And that's a very dark shadow for a country that prides itself on security, freedom, and opportunity. Number 2, racial inequality and systemic discrimination. Next on our countdown is an issue as old as the nation itself: racial inequality. America was built on ideals of freedom and equality, but it was also built on slavery. That contradiction has left scars that remain visible today. Even after the civil rights movement of the 1960s, racial disparities continue across almost every part of American life. Take wealth inequality. The average white household has nearly 10 times the wealth of the average black household. In education, schools in predominantly minority neighborhoods often receive less funding, leading to lower graduation rates and fewer opportunities. In the justice system, the disparities are stark. As we mentioned earlier, Black Americans are imprisoned at 5 times the rate of white Americans. Studies also show that they're more likely to be stopped by police, more likely to be sentenced harshly, and more likely to face barriers when re-entering society after prison. Housing discrimination still exists too. Practices like redlining, where banks denied loans to Black families in certain neighborhoods, created long-term segregation patterns that still shape cities today. Even now, minority applicants are often denied mortgages at higher rates than equally qualified white applicants. And then there's representation. While America celebrates diversity, many industries, from Hollywood to politics, still struggle with equal representation and opportunity. The darker truth is that systemic racism isn't just history. It's an ongoing reality. America has made progress, yes, but for millions of people, the promise of equal opportunity still feels out of reach. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." The question is, how long will it take to bend all the way? Number 1, the drug crisis. And finally, at number 1 on our countdown of America's darkest sides, we arrive at the ongoing drug crisis. A tragedy so big, it's reshaping cities, communities, and even whole generations. This story didn't start overnight. Back in the 1990s, pharmaceutical companies aggressively marketed prescription painkillers, opioids like OxyContin. They swore up and down that these pills weren't addictive. Spoiler alert, they were. Doctors handed them out like candy, and millions of people got hooked. When prescriptions ran dry, many turned to heroin. And now, we've entered the age of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid up to 50 times stronger than heroin. Just a few grains can kill. The results? Catastrophic. In 2023 alone, over 112,000 Americans died from drug overdoses. That's more than all the US combat deaths in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan combined, in a single year. And it doesn't stop there. Fentanyl is increasingly being mixed with a veterinary tranquilizer called xylazine, better known on the street as tranq. The mix doesn't just knock people out. It causes horrifying wounds, leaving users with rotting flesh. This is why in places like Kensington, Philadelphia, the epicenter of this crisis, the area has earned the nickname Zombieland. Walk down the streets there and you'll see people hunched over, barely conscious, frozen in unnatural positions, like extras from a low-budget horror movie. Only this isn't fiction. It's America, 2025. Think about that for a second. The richest nation in history has neighborhoods where thousands of people wander like the Walking Dead. Not because of some sci-fi virus, not because of aliens, but because of policy failures, corporate greed, and a broken healthcare system that let the problem grow unchecked. Yes, the government has launched task forces, seized shipments, and even declared the opioid epidemic a public health emergency. But on the ground, the crisis rages on. Families are being torn apart, children are growing up without parents, and communities are trapped in a cycle that feels almost impossible to escape. And here's the dark irony. While Wall Street debates interest rates and Silicon Valley builds artificial intelligence, entire blocks of American cities are being eaten alive by an epidemic no one seems able or willing to stop. So, let's recap. We've journeyed through 5 shadows of America, from systemic racism, to mass incarceration, to gun violence, to homelessness, and finally, the devastating drug crisis. Each one exposes a side of the United States that rarely makes it into the glossy tourist brochures or Hollywood blockbusters. But here's the thing. Calling out the dark side isn't about hating America. It's about facing uncomfortable truths, because only by confronting the shadows can you hope to create light. And if there's one thing history has shown, it's that America has the power to reinvent itself when the pressure is greatest. For now, though, the dark side remains. A reminder that every superpower has cracks, every dream has its costs, and every story has a chapter you wish wasn't true. So, the question I'll leave you with is this. Which of these dark sides shocked you the most? And what does it say about the future of America? Because one thing's for sure, the world is watching. And if you enjoyed this countdown and want more eye-opening stories from around the globe, don't forget to subscribe to Top Facts, where we uncover the truths you won't always find in the headlines. Hit that bell so you never miss the next deep dive.